So I was telling Morgan that I'm going to kind of go through stuff in sections a little bit and then pause to in case you have questions. And if you do have questions at any point, just unmute yourself and ask. I'm going to talk a little bit, and then I actually want to just go through like demonstrating like the feeding process because I have 3 bottle babies in my bathroom. So first I wanted to talk a little bit about how APA ends up with bottle babies that don't have a mom. There's usually 3 main ways that we do. The first way is that the mom, we don't ever just take babies away from a mom if they're doing well with the mom. We would never do that because they would always do better with their mom. But if a crisis has occurred, then sometimes we have to do that in order to save the lives of the puppies. So the most common event would be that the mother has died or that the mother has gotten very ill. So we'll get a request from either AAC, the city shelter here, or a shelter outside of Austin that they have this litter and they need help with it. So then we try to find fosters and we take. Another reason is mom just doesn't seem interested in the puppies. So they have a mom, but she's just either not interested in taking care of them or she actively is aggressive towards them, which is rare, but it does happen. We usually see this most frequently in like teen moms that are like first time moms and they just are doing. And then the third thing is that sometimes a mom just doesn't produce any milk. And so we have to take the pups from her, the babies are going to die. So a request for APA's help, what happens is that we usually have to send out an urgent plea like immediately because puppies really can't be skipping any feedings really because they'll start to decline almost immediately. So we'll send out an urgent plea and then respond back, and we usually have place, if they're at AAC, we usually have to place the puppies by the end of that day. So if you're going to come forward for a plea, you kind of have to be ready to take them like immediately, like that day. It's not a thing where like if we're saying it's urgent, it's not like, oh, okay, I can take them next week. Like that's usually not going to be an option. They need to go immediately. If they're coming from another place and they have a temp foster, sometimes we have a little bit of leeway, but you know, you wouldn't want to count on that. And as far as types of like lifestyle that you would have to take care of bottle babies, there's a lot of people that come forward when we send these urgent pleas that don't necessarily have the right kind of setup or lifestyle, because this really is like taking care of an infant child. You have to be willing to feed them every 2 to 3 hours, especially if they're under 2 weeks old. And that includes overnight. So it's going to be just a constant, at least for until they're weaned. So like if you get them when they're a few days old, 5 weeks old, it's going to be like your life is essentially going to revolve around their feeding times. So that's something you have to be aware of. If you like have a 8-hour job that you have to leave the house for, it's not going to really work unless your job allows you to take them with you to work. So right now is a good time for a lot of people to you know, try this out because a lot of people are working from home. But that's just something to consider if you're going to come forward, because we do end up having to turn people away when they realize the extent of like the commitment that it really is. But another thing is we really can't care for them in a shelter either. So it's not like we can, that's why it's always so urgent, because we can't just have, you know, like let somebody wait to take them when they're ready. There's no, they have to be cared for 24/7, and there's nobody that's going to be in the shelter being able to do that. Plus putting them in the shelter is going to expose them to disease and stuff like that. So when I'm going to try to share my screen. If you come forward and we determine that, you know, everything's good, you got a good schedule, it's going to work out, then you'll get a foster match letter. Let's see, how do I share? And it will have it'll have 2 documents actually that are specific for fostering bottle babies. And that will be, let's, 'cause, 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 will be a it's called Raising Puppies Without a Mom, essentially, is one of them. And then the other one is going to be called The Fading Puppy Protocol. I'm pushing present now. Oh, wait, here we go. This is the first time I've tried to do. Is this showing up? No.
Laurel, you have to select the screen you want to share. Is it giving you that option?
Yeah.
There we go.
See if it does it now. Okay. So here is the document that you will be sent. Is that showing up?
Yes.
Okay, so Raising Puppies Without a Mom. So I'm not going to read through everything because we're going to talk through it when I'm actually doing the demonstration for the most part. But the main things that I want to talk about are these contacts that you'll have. So it's important to know that your first point of contact for any foster dog really is that if you have any kind of medical concerns is the dog foster care at awesomepetsalive.org team. Oftentimes, though, what they will do, if you have just general bottle baby questions, or, you know, not an emergency, they're going to loop you in with the Bottle and Tube Baby Mentors, which is dog-foster-neonatal at Austin Pets Alive. And this will send your email to a group of people, including myself and other staff and experienced bottle baby fosters that can help just answer some basic questions. But sometimes if you have something that is more of an emergency, there's nothing more that group can necessarily do for you. You would need to go and speak to the clinic. And if it's, you know, a dire emergency, we'll talk about that and about what would be considered a dire emergency, then you'd probably want to just go ahead and call the clinic rather than sending an email. Okay, so first I want to go over just like what supplies that you want to have on hand. And I'm not going to just read these off. I'm going to actually just show you that I have everything set up here. Okay. So the first thing you're going to want to have is lots of towels. I'm going to try to show everything. Basically, you're going to be doing like a load of laundry a day if you have bottle babies. Generally, I'd like change out the towel that they're using every second feeding, just throw it right into the washing machine. You're going to need puppy pads. The way that I do it is you'll also need a heating pad. That's really important, especially for babies that are 0 to 3 weeks old. And the main thing about a heating pad is that you need to get one that does not have an auto shut off. So nowadays, if you go to like H-E-B or Target, the majority, or maybe even all of the ones they have an auto shut off after 2 hours. And that's just not going to work for bottle unless you know that you're going to be checking every 2 hours and turning it back on. It's just not going to work because you can't let them go any amount of time without being on the heating pad. So the brand that I know, there's like 2 brands that I know of that don't have the auto shut off. The one that I like the best is called Sunbeam. You can see this is what it looks like. And you can get it on Amazon for like $10. I always keep, I think the document says to keep it on low, but I found that that's not quite warm enough. So I always keep it on the medium setting. And then what I do is I use my bathtub. So I'll put the heating pad down on one side of the tub, and then I will put a puppy pad over that and then a blanket over top of that. And then for the rest of the tub, I put puppy pads down. So that way the puppies will naturally stay on the warmth unless something's gone wrong, which we'll talk about later. But and then they will usually, instinctually for the most part, they'll move off their sleeping area to use the bathroom. And then you can just easily change out the puppy pads. Another thing that you can use for warmth is I'm not really sure, you probably buy them on Amazon or maybe at Petco or a pet store. I got this one from APA, but all you do is you put it in the microwave and you heat it up for like, the longer you heat it up, the longer it's going to stay warm and the warmer it gets. So I usually heat it up for a minute and 30 seconds or 2 minutes. These are especially helpful if you have to transport the puppy like in a crate in your car, because you never want them to be off their heating source for any amount of time. Another thing you can do if you don't have one of these and you need to transport them is to put rice inside of a sock and then tie it off and then heat that up in the microwave like 30 seconds or 45 seconds, and then just tuck the puppy in next to that. Another thing that you need is a kitchen scale. You can get these really cheaply. I think HEB has one that's $10. This one is a digital one, which is nice. All the scales will have like a way to tare it. So if you need, oftentimes puppies are really squirmy and you'll need to kind of wrap them up like a burrito inside of a hand towel or like just a little blanket. So you'll want to put the blanket, so you know the weight of the blanket, and just tear that first before you weigh the puppy. You will want to weigh them once every day. Usually the best time to do that in the morning before the first feeding in the morning, and then you'll just basically keep track of that on a piece of paper. And this is really good way to just keep tabs on what's going on with the puppies. So you want to see them gaining weight every single day. That is what should be happening. And if it's not happening, that's an indication that something is going wrong. And typically, if you see weight loss 3 days in a row, that's a big red flag that you need to contact the clinic at that point, because there's some underlying issue that's going on. But we'll talk about ways to try to kind of deal with issues before it gets to that point. You also want to have Karo syrup. This is really good. You use this in the fading puppy protocol. You can also use it for finicky puppies to get them excited about eating, which I will demonstrate in a bit. I always have tubes and syringe in case the puppy needs to be tube fed, which I will touch on a little bit later. And then bottles. So the kind of bottles that we recommend are the Lancino Mama Slow Flow bottles. They're always purple, and there's 2 different sizes. I have a variety of the different sizes. We found that these work best, and you can get them at HEB. Over time, the nipple will kind of start to widen as it gets used more and more. So you may have to like throw away some of the older nipples, because as they get wider at the tip, the milk comes out faster and can lead to aspiration or choking the puppy. So, and also sometimes I've noticed like each nipple is just slightly different, and puppies can be finicky. So sometimes the hole is like too small and they can't get anything out. So you have to like poke it a little bit more to open it up. So those are the main, one more thing that I recommend having on hand is gas drops. I just use like little remedies for human babies. So if your puppy gets constipated, you can just give them a drop a couple times a day, and that helps. And it's actually really common for puppies when you're first getting them, because if they have just switched from mom's milk to formula, there's going to be some digestive upset going on. Or if they've switched from, wherever they were before, if they had them on a different kind of formula. Sometimes people feed goat milk. But then we always recommend Esvalac formula. Oh yeah, that's one more thing I want to show you. So yeah, you can expect when you first get a set of puppies that there may be some kind of diarrhea or constipation or just some kind of digestive issues while they sort of adjust to the new routine and then the new formula. And let me grab the formula really quick. So the formula that we recommend is Esvalac. I think there was one other kind that is in that raising puppies without a mom. I've never used it though. This I think is the best. And you want to make sure, so there's 2 sizes of this. Well, there's a lot of sizes, but we have either the smaller size or the larger size. I think it's best to get the larger size because it's a better deal. You can get it, the cheapest you can find it is on Amazon. It's typically about like $9 for the smaller size. You just want to make sure if you have had it for a while that you want to make sure it's not expired, because the stuff will go rancid after about a year, and that you keep it in when you're not actively using it for a set of puppies. You want to keep it in the freezer. If you keep it out on your, in room temperature, it goes rancid a lot more quickly. All right, so let's go ahead and I'm gonna go move into my bathroom now. As soon as I move in here, as soon as the puppies start to smell me, they're probably gonna start squealing because they want to eat. My dog is really confused about what I'm doing. Okay. So first I'm just gonna kind of show what my setup looks like. And they just lay there and they're not getting excited about eating,
Hey, Laurel.
then that would be, yeah.
When you turn the computer away from you, we're having a hard time hearing you.
Okay. So, so I'm just going to grab one and talk about making the formula. You're always wanting to use a 3-to-1 ratio, no matter what kind of formula you're using. So that's 3 parts water, the powder formula. So for this big bottle, I do 3 heaping scoops of the formula and then fill the rest with warm water. You want the water to be warm but not too hot. So I mean, it's just like if you're preparing a human baby bottle, you can test it on your skin. You can kind of feel like if it's unpleasantly hot to you, it's going to be too hot for the puppies. For the smaller bottle, I usually do 2 heaping spoonfuls and fill the rest with water.
Laurel, if we have an electric kettle and we can control the temperature, what is the temperature we would want to take it to?
So for the body temperature of, you want body temperature. For dogs, it's a little bit warmer. It's a few degrees warmer than human body temperature, so like 100 or just a little bit above that. Okay. And you'll find that some puppies are like more finicky than others about what the temperature is. Some like it a little bit warmer, and they'll spit it out if it's not. So typically, when you first get a set of puppies, the first like few days is going to be the most difficult, because that's when you're sort of getting to know those individual puppies. And their quirks. Like every set of bottle babies I've had are like have different personalities, and they all have their own individual quirks about what they like and how they like to take the bottle and stuff like that. So it can be a little bit frustrating in the very beginning until you kind of get into it. But now these guys, I've had these guys for about a week, so we're in a good routine now, but they gave me quite a bit of trouble at first. And I'll talk about them individually. This was the easiest one. So this is like what they should look like right before you them, but he's like rooting. She's rooting around, basically trying to find a nipple. And she's really good at latching. I've never had any issues with her latching. So the main thing that I see with people who are first starting to bottle feed is the way that they hold the puppy is sort of off and makes it hard for the puppy to take the bottle. You want to try and recreate what it would be like if they were nursing on mom, essentially. So I see a lot of people do this, like hang them in midair and try to get them to take the bottle like that. And that's just not efficient. You really want them to be able to have their back feet rooted on something, and then their front feet. So they're kind of standing, and then just kind of put the bottle in front of their face and then wrap. I personally like to sort of wrap my 2 fingers around their face like that to just try to hold it in place. They like to push on something like they would be kneading on their mom. So I just put my other fingers out like this so he can reach out. She can reach out and just sort of knead my hand a little bit. Do it on this side like that. So this. I usually sit on the floor to do it. You can sit in a chair. You can bend your knees. You can lean back on something. Just whatever works best for you. But basically, they will. I've found that for the most part, they will stop and stop. Occasionally, you'll have chunker puppies that don't know when to stop, and I'll talk about that when I get to the one who does that. Let's see. So some of the most common issues, this is very common, just the other ones are going to be screaming basically until they get fed. Let's see. Yeah, so once they kind of pull themselves off the bottle, then normally you know that they're done because they sort of just start to fall asleep basically immediately and just kind of relax. You can help them after they're done feeding by burping them, which there doesn't do, and it will happen naturally. If I were to just stick her back in there, she will burp by herself without me helping her do it. But for puppies, it just helps them do it faster, and it's good for puppies that have a tendency to regurgitate. That can help prevent them from doing that. If you're holding them upright and burping them. Oh yeah, another thing that is helpful on that Raising Puppies Without a Mom sheet is that it actually gives you a feeding chart and amount. So based on the puppy's weight, so you can know how much, what is the minimum amount basically that they should be given for an entire day. And it's based on 6 feedings per day. So that would be about every 4-hour feeding. And right now these guys are about 2.5 weeks. They just opened their eyes a couple of days ago. So they are on about 2-hour feedings. Or sorry, 4-hour feedings. So that would be 6 feedings a day. And they're all around 2 pounds now. So they need to have about 2 ounces per feeding. And these bottles all have like measurements on them, so that makes it easier to keep track. So to burp them, she's still wanting more. You can see she's still like kind of excited and rooting around because she really wants a little bit more, but I'll feed her more in a little bit. But you can just burp them by kind of patting them on the back like this. They will often kind of lick their mouth and make funny faces after they eat, and that's totally normal. And then she just burped. I don't know if you can hear that. But so they are over 2 weeks, so they don't need to be stimulated to go to the bathroom. They will go on their own. But for puppies that are under 2 weeks, you have to actually stimulate them yourself. So if they were with their mom, the mom would actually do it and then eat their food. And the moms keep doing that until they're like weaned, basically. Or they keep eating it. So to stimulate, you just use a cotton ball, basically, warm. I'm not actually going to do it because this puppy doesn't need that. But you just use you can do it. I like to use a puppy pad for ones that are really young, and I just set them down on it, and I just kind of rub their bum with the warm cotton ball and they just pee and poop. You can also do it over the sink if they're being messy about it, and just let warm water run and just kind of rub and let it go down the drain. And that just helps, well, it helps them be less messy, and it just keeps them regular, helps keep them regular. And if you notice that they're not going when you're stimulating them, you can try using those. You can also try using like a drop of mineral oil in your mouth. So this one is the front of this group. And when I first got this group, he was giving me a lot of trouble. He would not take the bottle at all, no matter what I did. So one of the things that you can do is use the Karo syrup. Actually, there's sort of like a list of things I'll check first. If I have a baby that is putting the bottle in its mouth and latching, but then immediately spitting it out, then I know that there's something that they're not liking about that formula or that bottle. They're wanting to eat, but there's something they're not liking. So first I will check to make sure that that formula is not expired, because if it's rancid, they're not going to want to eat it. Then I'll check and make sure that like bottle hasn't been sitting in the fridge for too long. And I might just dump it and prepare a fresh bottle and see if that helps. If that doesn't help, then I buy different temps. Some babies are really finicky about the temperature. This guy likes it a little bit warmer than the other puppies, and he'll reject it if it's like a little bit too cold. So sometimes I'll have to go and reheat just, a few more seconds for this one. If that doesn't work, then the next thing I generally try, then I'll check the nipple and see if there's something going on there. Maybe try different nipples and see if there's one that they like better. And if that works, then I will the Karo syrup and see if they get excited about sugar. So when you're using the Karo syrup, this is eventually what I had to do for this one. So I just kind of dip it. So you just kind of coat the nipple with the Karo syrup. And then that usually kind of gives them a sugar rush and stimulates them to latch. So with this guy, I think the issue was that he was given a different kind of formula before he came, and so he got used to that other formula and then just didn't like this one and was just being really picky about it. But now I think he finally realized that this is what he's going to get. He just accepted it. Some other things that come up with not taking a bottle, sometimes they will not stay latched for very long, or they'll kind of like fall off the bottle, or they will fall asleep while they're sucking on the bottle. And some things you can do for that is if they're falling asleep, you can rub their back kind of vigorously and try to keep them awake. Some things that I found work also is kind of stimulate their mouth by rubbing the sides of the mouth like this. If that doesn't help at all and they're just really lethargic, then at that point you're gonna want to contact the dog foster care team in the clinic, because there's probably some kind of underlying issue going on. And if that is happening and they're skipping feedings, especially, you want to contact them. If they just skip one feeding and then they're okay the next one, that's probably okay. But if they skip a second feeding, you're definitely going to want to contact the care team in the clinic. Another thing you can try, it can be really frustrating, especially if it's your first time doing it or you've never experienced babies do this kind of thing before. But just like, and it happens to myself too, I just get really kind of agitated and stressed out. And you just have to remember to kind of calm down, because I feel like sometimes the energy, your stressed out energy, gets passed on to the baby. So sometimes I'll just have to set the baby back down, take a moment, and then just try again and just keep doing that. So that's kind of what happened with this guy. is that I just had to keep trying over and over, and eventually he decided he would drink the bottle. Which basically means there wasn't any kind of underlying medical issue going on with him. Luckily, it was just him being kind of finicky. Okay, I'm gonna stop. Oh, another thing that can happen is that there are some cases where a baby can't, like, it won't even attempt to latch on the bottle at all. Or it's so lethargic that it can't even like hold its head up to latch on the bottle. These are issues that are definitely going to be addressed by the clinic. I have seen cases where, I'm going to take this out so I can show the tongue. They have a very specific way of rolling their tongue so that they latch. And you can, if it seems like they're not being able to latch, you can actually use your own finger on them in their mouth and see if they'll latch onto your finger. And you can sort of feel there's different things that they do to indicate they're not latching correctly. I've had babies like put their tongue to the top, to the roof of their mouth, and so you keep sticking, like it keeps going over top of the nipple instead of under the nipple. And sometimes you just sort of have to train them to put their tongue down. So if I can get them started on my finger and they start sucking and latching, then I'll try to quickly switch it out for the bottle. And that will sometimes work. If they're just not able to hold any kind of latch at all, there's a possibility that they have a cleft palate. They just can't latch. They're not going to be able to take a bottle if they have a cleft palate. Sometimes if it's right in the front, you can feel it. There'll be like a groove there on the roof of their mouths. But there are some cases, I had my last set of bottle babies before this one actually had one so far back in his mouth that I couldn't feel that that's what it was. But I knew something was going on because he could not latch at all. And in those cases, those babies are going to have to be tube fed, and you'll need to contact a clinic and let them make that determination. They'll probably send it to a more experienced foster that's able to tube feed. Then this is the last one. This is the chunker guy who doesn't know when to stop drinking. So I have to keep track of how much he's drinking, and he like cries the whole time as though he's not getting anything out, but he is. So you don't want them to overeat. If they are overeating to the point where they're like becoming bloated and it's giving them digestive issues, then you're going to need to start kind of keeping track of how much they're eating based on that feeding chart. And I can, for the people who are here, I can send out an email with that Raising Puppies Without a Mom document so that you can all look it over, as well as the Fading Puppy protocol. But yeah, it'll tell you how much they should be eating, at least as a minimum. So you just don't want them to overeat because they may regurgitate or they may get just digestive issues. And regurgitation can lead to other issues that you want to avoid. Some of the other common issues that come up with bottle babies this age that people kind of get really worried about in that mentor group is diarrhea. So we talked a little bit about constipation, so opposite of constipation. The worry with diarrhea is that they're going to become dehydrated, and especially if that's combined with like skipping feedings or just not drinking enough at a feeding, that can become worrisome and have them go downhill pretty quickly. So you want to contact the foster care team, like if the diarrhea persists more than a couple of days. And you can do a pinch test as well to see if they're dehydrated. So a pinch test would just be at the nape of the neck, basically just make a little pinch here. And if it bounces back right away, like this one is, then they're hydrated well enough. If you do that and it like stays up in a tint shape, that means they're dehydrated, and that would need to be addressed pretty quickly. Typically the diarrhea med called Metro, and then maybe Marquis paste, and then also give you subcutaneous fluids. for the puppies. Another thing that can come up is aspiration. So this can occur, some puppies are just more prone to it than others. This is when they swallow some of the formula into their lungs. And it can happen because they are just not coordinated with breathing and drinking at the same time. And you see this in human babies sometimes too. They just can't coordinate their breaths with their taking in the formula. It can happen because the puppies have gone too long from the previous feeding. And so they're like desperate and they're just so worked up about it that they're like choking on the formula as they're taking it. And it can also happen because of regurgitation. So if you're overfeeding them, or if you have a puppy that's just prone to regurgitation for some reason, that can happen. They can swallow some of that back into their lungs. So the issue with aspiration, and if you'll know that they're aspirating because bubbles immediately start coming out the nose and they start choking. And sometimes they start like gasping for breath. If that's happening while you're feeding, you immediately take the bottle away from the baby. You don't want that to continue for any amount of time, really at all. If this is something that just happened once and seemed to be a recurring issue, then it's not really a big deal. But if this is something that your puppy is prone to doing, like at every feeding, then you're going to need to contact the clinic about that because they need to be put on antibiotics right away. Because when that fluid sits on their lungs, it's going to result in an infection in the lungs and lead to aspiration pneumonia, which is a life-threatening condition. And once a puppy gets to that, you want to like catch these things before it gets to the worst stage. And I've had puppies go through pneumonia and it's terrible. That was one of the hardest probably situations that I fought with babies before. Let's see. Yeah, so missing meals is something that can happen that typically fosters get pretty worried, especially first-time fosters. If they miss one meal, it may be because they were just like, they need to poop and they were still full. But if it continues for more than one meal, or if it's a recurrent type issue where, you know, every other meal they're wanting to skip it, and especially if they're becoming more, you know, lethargic and less interested in eating, that's a reason also to contact the clinic because there's likely some kind of underlying issue going on that needs to be addressed. So the main thing is that once you like see any of these issues popping up, you want to get them addressed before they become something more serious and lead to fading puppy syndrome. Because oftentimes you can catch these things early. The weight is a really good way to keep track. So if the puppy is gaining weight every day and is vigorous like this guy, then things are good. But if something's, you know, then you want to get it addressed pretty quickly before it leads to something worse. See, he's eaten like 3 ounces already and he never thinks he's full. So I just have to kind of stop him. Okay, so are there any questions so far just about kind of like the common type issues that can pop up, or has anybody seen anything that they've dealt with that they weren't sure about? If not, the next thing I'm going to talk about is like fading puppy syndrome and the fading puppy protocol. So I'm going to switch back. So fading puppy syndrome happens when, this is why it happens, they're either hypoglycemic, they haven't gotten enough calories and sugar, or they're hypothermic. And it usually occurs from, you know, birth to 2 weeks. So 0 to 2 weeks is typically like sort of that danger period where that's when you see if the puppies are going to pass away, that's when they're going to pass away. I'm going to try to share my screen. All right, is that showing?
Yes,
No.
it's showing.
You know,
Oh, it is? Uh-huh.
okay. Okay, so yeah, so fading puppy syndrome is life-threatening, and it's pretty apparent when that's happening. So the puppy will kind of stop responding. They won't be interested in eating. They may be gasping for breath, and they may be making cries that sound very strange and not like the kind of cries that they make when they're wanting to eat. So yeah, it's caused by hypothermia, being too cold, or hypoglycemia. So it's really important that you need to combat those two issues immediately. When you're doing the fading puppy protocol, usually if you've been taking care of the puppies and keeping them on a heating pad and feeding them regularly, it's going to be due to some medical issue. So you're doing this fading puppy protocol is essentially sort of like a supportive care to just keep them alive while you try to address what that underlying issue is. Usually they're going to need more intervention than just this protocol, but this protocol can keep them alive until you can get that. So you'll need to take a heating pad, wrap them up in a blanket, and then wrap the heating pad around that and make sure that stays on them all the time. And then you'll want to start giving them simple syrup, so sugar water, or you can just use the Karo syrup and rub it straight on their gums, preferably. And you'll need to do that every few minutes. So just take a dab of Karo syrup, rub it on the gums. While you're doing that, you want to call the clinic. If it's after hours, there's an after hours number you can call, but just be aware that a lot of times when this happens, you know, people panic and they want someone else with more knowledge to take the puppy from them because they want, which is understandable, they want the puppy to thrive, and most people don't have the confidence that they, especially if you're, you know, a newer bottle baby foster, that you know what you're doing. So you want to hand it off to somebody with more experience. But when it gets to this stage, there's nothing more that anybody else can really do in that moment to keep them alive. So you're going to be their best chance just by doing this protocol, and then alerting the clinic to what's going on so that they can try to, you know, prescribe other medications that may help. And usually it will be like an antibiotic, a warmer in case it might be parasites, and subcutaneous fluids are general things that they would use. And sometimes there are just underlying issues that are just going to be fatal, that there's no kind of treatment. And that's, you know, that's one reason why dogs have such large litters. It's kind of like a insurance policy. So it's not uncommon for 1 or 2 puppies in a litter to pass away because there's some kind of underlying issue, some kind of congenital issue. And let's see. So yeah, when you call, like, so often if you do call the clinic after hours, they're just going to tell you to keep doing what you're doing, and taking the time to drive them somewhere to have somebody else try to do that same thing is only going to make the situation worse, and it's likely that they may die on the way, because if you have to remove them from the heat, or you're not giving them the sugar every few minutes, then that's going to be detrimental. And unfortunately, like, if you foster a lot of babies, this will probably occur at one time or another. It is rare, but it can happen, so it's a good thing to be prepared for. And all you can know is that you can just do your best, and that's all anybody can ask. Let's see if there's anything else on here. And just to, you know, keep in mind that these puppies would have died. They all would have died if you hadn't been there to, you know, help them. So anything that you can do for them is better than what would have happened to them. All right, let me switch back. So yeah, I can send this out to people as well. Let's see. Yeah, so if you are a first-time bottle baby foster, well, let me switch back to this. Okay, if you're a first-time bottle baby foster, I would recommend taking babies that are 2 weeks and above for your first time, just because it's less likely, like if they were going to have passed away due to congenital issues, it would have already happened at that time. Not always, but usually. I will say that my first set of bottle babies were like 2.5 weeks old, and that was a perfect introduction for me because it went really well, and it gave me more confidence to want to do younger bottle babies. Yeah. So any questions about that, or things that you would need to do, or what would be considered an emergency and what wouldn't? Last thing I wanted to talk about was just the weaning process for puppies. So once they get to about 4 weeks, they're going to start getting little teeth coming in. And then once they're getting to like 5 weeks, the teeth are going to be pretty sharp. Usually by that point, they're like actually starting to gnaw on the bottle with their teeth. And that's kind of a sign that it's time to start weaning them. So the way that I found is most effective is that I will just make a slurry with like wet puppy food mixed with the Esvalac formula, and then I'll just put it in with them, and I'll like take a little bit and kind of rub it on the roof of their mouth, or just put a little bit in my hand and put it right up to their face and see if they're interested in it. Usually they are interested in it, and so I'll just leave that in there. They're gonna make a huge mess. It's just inevitable. Stage are still not a big deal. And I will continue, at that point, I will still continue giving them the bottles as I was before. So I'm still giving the bottles, but I'm just introducing them to that new food. And then over time, like over the course of a week, I'll start removing 1 bottle a day. Like, so I'll take 1 bottle away for a couple days. You want to make sure that you always have like fresh food. I'll usually leave it for like half a day and then replace it if they haven't eaten it all. If you don't have, another thing you can use that really entices them if they don't seem interested in the wet food and mixture is called Royal Canine Puppy Mousse. And the puppies really seem to go crazy about that, but it's also kind of expensive. So we don't expect fosters to buy it. But if you're having a really finicky baby, you might want to try that to see if that works. Some people also just use dry puppy kibble, and they just soak it in water or soak it in the formula. You want to still be giving them some formula in the gruel for at least like until they're like 6 weeks old, because they need all that fat. There's a lot of fat and protein in the formula that they need. And then you can just let it soak. It gets all big, and then you can just like put it in a blender and make it into a gruel smoothie basically. So yeah, then I'll just continue that, just removing a bottle every few days. Until you're down to just 1 bottle, the nighttime bottle. So that's kind of the same as human babies. They still want their like nighttime bottle because it helps them go to sleep. And I'll just kind of leave that for a few days. And then if you're lucky, they actually start losing interest on it on their own. And rather than like actually, it's almost like they forget how to latch anymore. And all they do is just mess around with the nipple and just like gnaw on it and play with it. And so they kind of just wean themselves naturally. It's just like a process that needs to be done gradually. And I think that's pretty much it. Usually I start switching them over to like dry puppy kibble, maybe at like 6.5 weeks. And that seems to be fine because their teeth are pretty much in by then. And one more thing I did want to mention is that when you're fostering bottle babies, we don't like expect you to keep them all the way until they get adopted. If you want to move them after they have been weaned, then that's fine. It's a lot easier for us to find fosters that can take weaned puppies or gruel puppies or whatever than it is for us to find fosters that are willing to take bottle babies. So if you want to move them at that point, that's fine. I will say though that most people have put in so much work at that point and get so attached and wanting them to find a good home that they just want to go ahead and keep them until they get adopted. That's what I always say. I'm going to move them, and then I never do because I get too invested. So I think that's pretty much all I have. If there's any questions that I can answer, I'm happy to do that. Also, I didn't go over tube feeding. We don't have time, but if anybody is interested in that, I think it's a good tool to have for everybody. I can talk to people individually about that. Any other questions?
Laurel, can you quickly show us how to burrito wrap one of the puppies if there is a need for fading puppy protocol?
Yeah, so I'll just take a towel, just wrap it up like this, and then grab this heating pad. Lucky this one is happy and full right now. He's not fighting this at all. And I just take this and wrap it around outside of the thing. And you can use like duct tape and just tape it together, actually, or you can use, I don't know, like a string or a cloth to wrap, or another towel to wrap around that, just to make sure it doesn't come off. And if you do end up having to transport them at all, you're going to need to transport them like this, and maybe even stick like one of the soft with them as well, because it's really important that they stay warm the whole time. Once they are like above 2 weeks old, they still need to stay warm, but sometimes they will actually on their own move off the heat because they can like start to, get a little bit too hot sometimes, and then by the time they're like 4 weeks, they really don't want to be on the heat at all. They usually spend the time on there. Yeah,
and if your puppy isn't fading puppy, they're not going to be squirming to get out of the burrito like that.
No, they're going to be completely lethargic. Yeah.
Right. And it's important to know that you don't take them out of the burrito to give them the sugar. You leave them in the burrito.
You have their head up at the top and you just keep dabbing it on the roof of their mouth. Or if you're using the sugar syrup, you just use a syringe and put a few squirts in their mouth. And being careful.
Sorry, mm-hmm. And that blanket should be already warmed, right? That you wrap them in.
It'll warm up pretty quick. Yeah. Okay. It'll probably warm up pretty quick. I'm not sure how you could like. I mean, usually it's an unexpected situation, so you're not going to have time to like warm up the blanket ahead of time. You just kind of got to do that as fast as possible.
Just like keep some like socks with flax or rice on hand, just so that can happen really fast. Like, something. Yeah, I mean, turning on. Usually, I mean, you could use the heating pad that's like already underneath them and heat it up, and then this is why I like to have multiple heating pads on hand, because I have 3 bottle babies. So if one of them is fading, I'm still going to need to keep the other ones on a pad. So I'll grab the one that's already warmed up and wrap it with that, and then put another one down for the other 2. Okay. And luckily, I mean, this is a rare situation. If you're paying attention to your puppies, you can catch these issues before it progresses to this state usually, unless it is like an underlying congenital situation that is out of anybody's control, and that it's rare. I mean, once they hit like 4 or 5 weeks and they're weaning, obviously you're not keeping them in the bathtub by themselves, right? I usually move. It depends on the size of the puppies and like how active they're getting. I'll usually move them once they're going through that weaning process. I'll move them into a puppy playpen area so they have more room. And because I want to use my tub again. Okay. How do you keep your other dogs away from that? Do you just keep them in a completely separate? So I just close the bathroom door. That's right. You wanted to talk about that. So I don't let my dogs interact with them at all. Mm-hmm. Really. But yeah, I just keep them. So I just close the door to my bathroom. When they're in the puppy playpen, I'll block it off. That is in my laundry room, so I can close that door, or I just use another baby gate to block them off from going into the laundry room in general. You can, I would say, if you're going to let your dog meet them, you want to be holding the puppy. Right. We don't. It's physical contact that's going to get them sick, right? So. What's that? It's physical contact that might get them sick.
Well, it shouldn't be an issue with your resident dog if your resident dog is fully vaccinated.
Okay. I just thought keep them away completely, just in case, like my dog sniffed poop and picked it up on her nose. Or
yeah, that's a good practice for sure. I would be more concerned with like the dog just doing something unexpected, because it only takes a second for something to go horribly wrong, and it has happened unfortunately before with fosters. So, yeah, you just want to be like in control of the puppy all the time, basically.
Sure. Okay.
And not like letting them crawling around in the underneath your dog's feet. Yeah.
Okay. That's just my main concern, just because she has raised puppies before, and every other dog she's ever seen, she's been like, I hate you, dog. And every time like a puppy that we live in the country, so every time like a neighbor puppy is like, hi, she's always like, I need you right now, please come here.
Yeah.
Because
yeah, I mean, once they get to be like, 6 weeks, like at this age, they don't even know what's going on.
Right.
Like they're not even they're not even interacting with each other right now. They're not mentally like capable yet. So, but once they get to be like 6 weeks or whatever, that's great. It's good for them to interact with your dog under your supervision, because they can learn social skills and stuff like that.
Okay. I don't know if my dog has social skills, but
But even things like learning bite inhibition. So, I mean, your dog, if they bite your dog too hard, hopefully your dog will tell them, like, don't do that. And that's always a good thing for puppies to learn.
Okay. And then other people, like, I know it's important to try to introduce them to people other than those in the house. At what age do you start doing?
So I really wouldn't do that until they've had their first vaccinations, which is at 6 weeks.
Okay.
And then you want to limit that to just, you don't want to be you can't take them out in public at all.
Yeah, not taking them,
because they're not safe.
but
having people over to the house. Yeah. Yeah, I would wait until 6 weeks. That's usually when I do it, because it's just not worth the risk before that point. Because yeah.
Okay.
And even like age 0 to 2 weeks, you want to minimize your handling of them as much as possible too. All you really should be doing is taking them out, feeding them, burping, and then putting them back in the eating pad, because you don't want to take them off the eating pad for very long.
Okay.
But it is fun at around 3.5 weeks when they start to like play with each other and their personalities kind of start to come out. All right. Any other questions? Hi. Well, thank you for being here, and you can email me. My email is just laurel.mol. I think it was on that invitation. I'm not sure. Laurel.moulton@austinpets.org. Actually, I'll go ahead and send y'all all an email that has these documents, and you can feel free to ask me any other questions that you might have. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laurel.
Thanks for being here.
Have a good night.
You too. Bye.
Bye.